This is the first book written by Peter Hitchens that I've read. Written while his brother Christopher was still alive, and partly a response to Christopher's more famous and celebrated God is Not Great. The Rage Against God is part memoir, part lament for England's dying Christianity, part metaphysical argumentation, refuting common atheist arguments, and also a defence of the institution of religion against the common attacks it suffers from the left, as well as an examination of post-religious societies. I found Hitchens' arguments regarding the atheist nature of the USSR to be very convincing. He very effectively refutes the absurd notion that the Stalinist state was itself a religion, and deals well with the argument that war in the name of religion is not in fact always a religious war, and that, often, religion is merely a propaganda tool used for morale-boosting purposes in wars, being fought for entirely non-religious reasons. An astonishing piece of data that Hitchens presents when talking about the moral decay of post-religious Russia is that in 1991, 6.5 million babies were aborted and only 4 million were born, and that in Soviet Russia, abortion had become the main means of contraception. His point being that in this society where religion had been abolished by the state, there was no moral force left to resist such abominations as abortions of convenience, or, in this case, morning after abortions. Hitchens might be surprised at just how right he was, looking 20 years after he wrote this book, at the crowds of idiots gleefully dancing in Dublin's O'Connell Street to celebrate the legalisation of the dismemberment of unborn babies, though these moral simpletons would probably argue that it is not the inevitable deaths of hundreds of thousands of babies they're celebrating, but rather the woman's right to carry out such slaughter. Hitchens predicted such moral impoverishment. He knew that post-Christian European countries are not the moral superiors of preceding generations. The modern Irish, Swedes, and Germans did not emerge enlightened from the evils of organised religion, bravely armed with a new set of commandments handed down from the Mount of Progress, but rather that these modern European peoples who based their worldview on the cult of progress are the moral and spiritual inferiors of those that came before them. Oh, for fuck's sake, man. Hitchens also gives some interesting observations about the lack of common manners, general vulgarity, and personal coldness of the people of Moscow. Put bluntly, he gives the impression that they are total assholes, though he does admit that they are capable of showing some human warmth in the confines of their own homes. What he doesn't point out is that being nice in your own home doesn't do general society any damn good. Life is hard, and failing to have basic standards of public decency only makes it worse. Hitchens suggests that the general decline in etiquette may be linked to the loss of religion, though may just as likely be the result of living in a poor, mind-controlling despotate for half a century. A particularly charming aspect of this book are the glimpses of personal history the author sprinkles throughout it: an encounter with the corrupt, drunken, bribe-seeking police of Moscow, a conversation with a colleague who is concerned about Hitchens' attendance of church, witnessing the last great British battleship being towed to the breaker's yard, and, most touching, an evening he spent with his then healthy brother, who very uncharacteristically cooked him supper and talked enthusiastically about how he'd given up smoking. The death of Christopher Hitchens, caused by a lifetime of chain smoking and binge drinking, makes this scene in which he optimistically relates his plans to improve himself all the more poignant. The only issue I have with the book is that it is not coherently structured, though not necessarily in a bad way. It reads more like a very well thought out conversation rather than a planned chaptered opus. This makes the book an interesting read and an excellent listen when enjoyed in audio format, as the author himself recorded the book and did a fantastic job of it, but does make it difficult to follow at times, since the book jumps freely around topics, ideas, events, and personal recollections. One thing the book is definitely missing is the author's reasons for his belief in God. He does not clearly state why he believes Christianity to be true and how he came to this realization. Rather, he writes about how his abandonment of religion as a wanker teenager, filled with sixth form idealism, what today might be called corporate morals, turned him into a degenerate morally and socially, though he gives no details about the vile acts he committed as a delinquent, which is a shame because it would no doubt have made for excellent reading. Overall, I would say this is a very good book, a semi-memoir that inhabits a structure built upon recollection, the calm expression of moral outrage, and some interesting reflections on the author's relationship with his famous, flawed, and irreplaceable brother. I give it 4 stars, and the Tyrant's seal of recommendation.